Hi everyone, welcome back to the penultimate talk of the day. We're now welcoming Nisan and Gümüş with the talk, A Sociopragmatic Study on Turkish Native Speakers, Condolence Speeches.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. This is gonna be on the master thesis of mine, which is titled A Sociopragmatic Study on Turkish Native Speakers, Condolence Speeches. Well, you all know what condolence means. According to Cambridge University Press, condolence is a sympathy for the family or friends of a person who has recently died. Previous studies of condolences have brought to the foreground some semantic formulas. These include acknowledgement of the death, expressions of sympathy, offers of assistance, future-oriented remarks, expression of concern, expressions of empathy, sharing a similar experience, statement of not knowing, statement of lacking words, positive statements, an expression of surprise, related questions, related comments, denial, apologetic, religious-oriented sympathy, second absolution formula, direct condolence, and religious expressions. The findings of this study may overlap to teachers of Turkish as a foreign language and material developers. And that is an undeniable fact in our lives. So, knowing the appropriate way of expressing condolences in the target language is an essential aspect of language learning. Given the highly sensitive nature of this subject, it is of great importance that language learners get exposed to effective data contained in of condolences. This study aims to reveal how the speakers of Turkish expresses condolences and what's meant for formalization and reuse. Examples from the authentic Facebook data are used and presented to native speakers of Turkish in a survey by asking how they would use condolences to their close friends and acquaintances to determine the distance between the condoler and the grief as a role in the social life. Also, the rank of the imposition is used as a social variable to find out whether the condolence strategies of the informants differ depending on the degree of distance between the condoler and the grief as well as the degree of distance between the grief and the deceased. We have three main questions. The first one is the following. What are frequently used condolence strategies and semantic formulas for expressing condolences by native Turkish speakers as comments under that announcements on Facebook? Secondly, what are the frequently used condolence strategies and semantic formulas by native Turkish speakers in the case of bereavement when there are social distance differences between the condoler and the bereaved? And thirdly, what are the frequently used condolence strategies and semantic formulas by native Turkish speakers in the case of bereavement when there are differences in the ranking of position between the bereaved and the deceased? I assume that not everybody is familiar with the definition of pragmatic, so I would like to explain this briefly. Pragmatics is the study of how the speaker communicates with the hearer. It is concerned with what is in the speaker's mind and what the speaker assumes to be in the hearer's mind. Austin and Sir, who were pioneers of the concept of speeches, describe speeches as the smallest conflicts that people utilize in their interactions. Sir asserts that speeches of condolences, congratulations, apologies, and thanks belong to the class of expressives because they explain our mental condition, emotional state, as well as behavioral differences. As for the Turkish theory, goal-set environment say that the numerous styles of speech people employ, as well as the context of society that influence how they are utilized and understood, are explained within the scope of theory. Another important concept within the framework of politeness theory is proposed by Goffman in 1967. He says that face is the positive social value a person effectively claims for himself by the line others assume he has taken during a particular contact. Later on, Brown and Nisan handled this notion as the main component of their politeness theory, and they defined it as something that's emotionally invested and that can be lost, maintained, or enhanced, and must be constantly attended to in interaction. Social distance is another crucial notion in this theory. So I would like to briefly explain this. According to researchers, it is defined as social similarity or difference, frequency of contact, length of acquaintance, familiarity or how well people know each other, sense of like-mindedness, and positive or negative effect. When it comes to the other important concept, which is the ranking of the composition, it is defined as the actual degree of responsibility which an individual intends to convey to their audience. Yeah. I would like to mention our participants. For the first step of the study, we found 25 native speakers of Turkish living in Turkey who made that announcements on Facebook. And by getting their consent, copied all the comments on the release to a separate Word file. In total, 1,215 native Turkish speakers made 1,305 comments, consisting of 5,723 common speeches. For the second step of the study, with the purpose of controlling the sociolinguistic variables of social distance and the ranking of the position, the data gathered from Facebook comments used in a survey consisting of a background information questionnaire and a Likert scale questionnaire. 318 native Turkish speakers studying at Hacettepe University completed the survey in which we tested their assessments of the level of appropriateness of different types of condolences. Only the ones who stated in the background information questionnaire that they were Muslim, native speakers of Turkish, and born and raised in Turkey were included in the study to maintain homogeneity. In addition, we excluded the survey responses from informants who indicated their parents were not Muslim, who indicated their parents' native language of Turkish, or who indicated their parents were not born and raised in Turkey. The section on background information consisted of questions asking the informant's age, gender, native language, official religion, place of birth, the place where they spent most of their lives, and whether the place they were born and the place where they spent most of their lives were rural or urban areas. In this section, we also asked what their parents' social, official religion, native language, and birthplace were, and whether their birthplace and the place they spent most of their lives was a rural or urban area. Aiming to calculate the informant's assessment, we prepared a 5-point Likert scale ranging from chocolate to cholesterol, where they were asked to rate 4 situations based on their acceptability. Even though the strategies of offer of assistance, religious-oriented sympathy, say about not knowing, and denial were not present in the text comments to Turkish native speakers, they were included as statements in our Likert scale to determine if they were not on Facebook because it's a social networking site. This table shows all the contents which I have included in this dissertation and other studies. As you see, the last column shows the ones which were included in our study. In this dissertation, quantitative research taking place secondarily was focused on, which means we adopt the sequential exploratory design. To answer our first research question, the results of the Facebook data will be revealed in this section. As you see, the first most common used strategy in the comments on Facebook were feature-oriented remarks with a percentage of 35.6%. And the second most common one was the strategy of release expressions with the percentage of 31.7%. And the third most common strategy was signal solution from that with the percentage of 14.7%. To answer our second research question, the results of the likelihood scale questionnaire can be revealed in the following section. In the first and fourth situations, where the variable of the ranking of the position was controlled, sharing a similar experience, denial, related comments, expression of disappointment, religiously oriented sympathy, an expression of surprise, acknowledgement of the death, and related questions were the most frequently used strategies as very likely and likely. But when it comes to the third situation, we have two strategies which are signal solution from that, expression of empathy, and these strategies were not frequently used for the situation. As for the fourth situation, we have again strategies that were not frequently used in the first situation. And these are positive statements and statement of not knowing. On the other hand, the strategies of positive statements and expression of empathy were rated differently in the first and fourth situations due to the variances in the variable of social distance in the first situation. The ones who rated positive statements as unlikely and unlikely are 40.5%, while in the first situation, those who rated it as very likely and unlikely were 64%. As for the speech act of expression of empathy, in the first situation, the ones who rated it as very likely and unlikely were 49.5%, whereas in the fourth situation, those who rated it as very unlikely and unlikely were 45.5%. In our second situation, the variable of the ranking of the imposition were controlled. In both of these situations, the strategies of imposition, the strategies of denial, positive statements, sharing a similar experience, related comments, and expression of surprise, expression of disappointment, acknowledgement of the death, expression of empathy, religious-oriented sympathy, and expression of sympathy were the most frequently used ones, as very likely and unlikely. Nevertheless, the strategies of apologetic, appropriate assistance, and related questions were rated differently in the second and third situation because of the variances in the variable of social distance. In the second situation, the ones who rated apologetic as very unlikely and unlikely were 89.5%, while in the third situation, those who rated it as very likely and unlikely were 50%. As for the speech act of appropriate assistance, in the second situation, the ones who rated it as very unlikely and unlikely were 63%. Whereas in the third situation, it was rated as very likely and likely were 41.5%. Also, in the second situation, it was rated related questions as well or unlikely were 51.5%. Although in the third situation, those who rated it as very likely and likely were 53.5%. In comparison with our findings, research by Wakefield and Itakura indicated several notable differences and similarities. First, although acknowledgement of the death was frequently rated as very likely and likely regardless of social distance in our study. In their study, it was used less frequently by Japanese speakers when social distance was low. Second, we found that expression of surprise was frequently rated as very likely and unlikely regardless of social distance. Yet, Wakefield and Itakura pointed out that Japanese speakers used it more frequently and social distance was low. Third, they noted that expression of sympathy was the most frequently used strategy by both English and Japanese speakers, regardless of the social distance between the deceased and the breed. Similarly, in the second and third situations of our research, it was rated as very likely and likely regardless of social distance. To answer our third research question again, I will present the Venn diagram. In our first situation and the second situation, where the variable of social distance was controlled, strategies of denial, sharing a similar experience, related comments, expression of support, use of sympathy, and expression of surprise, acknowledgement of the past, and expression of empathy, were most frequently used as very likely and likely. But this was not the case in our second situation and in our first situation. Strategies of positive statements and expression of sympathy were rated as very likely and likely frequently, but this was not the case in our first situation. Yet, the strategies of expression of sympathy, positive statements, related questions, and statement of lacking words were rated differently in the first and second situations, owing to the variances in the variable of the ranking of the imposition. In the first situation, those who needed expression of sympathy as very unlikely and unlikely were 66%, while in the second situation, those who rated it as very likely and likely were 54%. As for the subject of positive statements, in the first situation, the ones who rated it as very unlikely and unlikely were 40.5%, whereas in the second situation, those who rated it as very likely and likely were 84%. In addition, in the first situation, those who rated related questions as very likely and likely were 50%. Although in the second situation, those who rated it as very unlikely and unlikely were 21.5%. Furthermore, in the first situation, the ones who rated statement of lacking words as very unlikely and unlikely were 61%. While in the second situation, those who rated it as very likely and unlikely were 43.5%. In our third and fourth situations, the variable of social distance was controlled. The strategies that were frequently used in the third situation were expression of empathy, expression of sympathy, expression of disappointment, denial, related comments, sharing a similar experience, and expression of surprise, religious-oriented sympathy, acknowledgement of the bad, and positive statements. While in our situation, the strategies which were frequently used as very likely and unlikely were expression of disappointment, denial, related comments, sharing a similar experience, and expression of surprise, religious-oriented sympathy, acknowledgement of the bad, positive statements, related questions, and statement of wrong. However, strategies or statement of second verse, apologetic expression of sympathy, expression of empathy, and offer assistance are differently in the third and fourth situations on account of the variances in the variable of the ranking position. In the third situation, the demonstrated statement second verse has very likely and likely verb 57.5%, while in the fourth situation, those rates it as very unlikely and unlikely verb 51%. As for the speech act of policy, in the third situation, the ones who rated it as very high 50%, whereas in the fourth situation, those rated it as very unlikely or 72%. Additionally, in the third situation, those rated expression of sympathy as very likely and likely 8%, although in the fourth situation, those rated it as very unlikely and likely were 45.5%. Moreover, in the third situation, the ones who rated expression of empathy as very likely and likely were 70%, while in the fourth situation, those who rated it as very unlikely and unlikely were 45.5%. Also, in the third situation, the ones who rated offer of assistance as very likely and likely were 41.5%, whereas in the fourth situation, those who rated as very unlikely and unlikely were 68%. When the informant's ratings of the strategy of positive statements in the first and fourth situation, as well as in the second and third situations, were analyzed by categorizing the situations into two groups. It was found that the majority of the native Turkish speakers were not aware of the variances in social distance in both groups. As for the speech act of offer of assistance, most of the native Turkish speakers noticed the differences in social distance between the condoler and the breed in the second and third situation. But this was not the case in the first and fourth situations. In this regard, the ratings of the strategy of offer of assistance indicated that most of the informants were aware of the differences in social distance only in the second and third situations. Moreover, when their ratings of the strategies of acknowledgement of the bad, positive statements, and offer of assistance in the first and second situation, and the ratings of the strategies of statement of inverse, apologetic acknowledgement of the bad, religious expressions, expression of empathy, offer of assistance, denial, future-oriented remark, and expression of concern in the third and fourth situations were examined in the report. It was found that the majority of them were not conscious of the differences in the ranking of the imposition. On the strategy, it suggests that most of the native Turkish speakers noticed the variations in the ranking of the imposition between the period and the disease was expression of sympathy. I would like to thank a couple of people and Twitter, and of course you for listening. This is the end of
We thank Nisan and Gümüş for the talk, and now we can take questions.
Hi, thank you for the talk. Could you, maybe I missed it, but could you describe what the first, second, third, and fourth situations are?
Of course, because of time limitation, I couldn't include my questionnaire, and it's a very long questionnaire, the background information part and the survey part. So I can show it if it's possible to connect it to my own laptop. Is it possible?
Or I guess you were talking about there's a difference in
Social
closeness.
Closeness between, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it was the first situation very close, the second was very far, the third one was maybe just
Yeah, there are intricate differences in all the four situations, hypothetical situations. For instance, in the first one, if the social distance between the bereaved person and the condoler was high. What I mean by that is, if the condoler is a close friend of the bereaved person, and if the bereaved person, if the deceased person is a very close person to the bereaved one, like their father or mother. Is there any change in their use of strategies or not? That's what I was looking for. So I designed all the 4 situations based on this these differences.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the speech you gave. I would like to ask, how did you make sure that the people you're studying are related to each other in terms of closeness? Is it like a field in a survey or something? Did I miss anything? Like,
No, you didn't miss it. I guess I didn't mention the details about the survey. These survey items were hypothetical. Since we cannot measure the relationship patterns of commenters under that announcements on Facebook, we have to analyze it by using the comments in a survey, in a hypothetical, containing hypothetical situation, so that we can measure if their relationships affect the strategies they use or not.
okay, I think I got it. Thanks.
Unfortunately, due to that time limitations, we can't take any more questions. Thank you for the talk and thank you for the question. And now for the last talk of the day, we welcome Madeline Ladore with the talk Plural, Semantics in Akan, an experimental investigation.
Oh, I'm short. Oh. All right. Yes, you guys. Hi everyone, I'm Madeline Ladore from the University of Virginia, and I'm part of the research working group for meaning mismatches. And so today I'm going to be presenting. So I've got 2 experiments that I'll be presenting to you today, as well as some data I've collected over the past few months in some elicitation sessions. So this one and this one. So at first glance, plurals are understood as meaning more than one, but in certain contexts, a plural marked noun can denote one or more. So here we do have this one's good. So here we have a positive sentence, John planted trees. So this can only mean that John planted more than one tree. It's not possible to be true in a situation where he planted a singular tree or no trees. Only true in a situation where he planted a plurality of trees. And in 1b, we have the negative sentence where the entailment pattern is reversed. John didn't plant trees, and this is true in a situation where he did not plant one tree, and he also did not plant a plurality of trees. So you see on the side here, I've got inclusive and exclusive which are bolded according to which is the true interpretation. And inclusive basically means that the atomic interpretation, the ability for the singular to be true in the sentence is there. If that makes sense for everyone. So under negation, English's plurals have this inclusive interpretation where it's possible for one object to have been acted on. The exclusive reading is also available, but it is just preferred. So we see here in 2, John didn't plant trees, he only planted 1. It's only possible to get this reading with a continuation, though there's some mental processes that are involved that allow for this interpretation to be gained. So we also see this inclusive interpretation in other downward entailing contexts, not just negation. So in 3, we've got the plural under the scope of a universal quantifier. So everyone who planted trees received a gift card. If you only planted 1 tree, you still get the gift card. And also any questions. So here in 4, did John plant trees? You would answer yes, even if John only planted 1 tree, right? So these would still have the inclusive interpretation. So what about other languages? Most languages with the singular plural marking system, such as English, have inclusive plurals in downward entailing contexts. There is a possible exception in the literature of Western Armenian, where Bale and Kanjian have claimed that plurals are inclusive under negation, but exclusive under other downward entailing contexts. But this is only mentioned in a footnote of the appendix. So I think if you put it up to an experiment, we would see it patterned the same way as English, Turkish, Akan, all of these languages do, right? So there's been a second claim by Comfort Akan in her recent paper, where she presents some data claiming that Akan's plural prefix may have an exclusive interpretation, while the plural circumfix has an inclusive interpretation. So taking a look at Akan, it's a group of closely related languages in the Kwa subgroup of the Niger-Congo language family. And there's various sub-dialects of Akan, with the most popular ones being Ashanti-Twi, Akwa-Pem-Twi, and Fante. Most of the participants in these experiments are Ashanti-Twi speakers. So it's spoken by about 44% of Ghana's population as a native language, and it's also a bit into Cote d'Ivoire, as you can see here on the map. It's an SVO language with a singular plural number system, and it has a defunct noun class system, but some of the effects of this are still apparent in the modern grammar, such as in the form marking system. So common nouns are formed, the singulars are formed with a number denoting prefix. In the singulars, it shows up as a vowel. The specific realization of the vowel is determined by the former noun class system, as well as some phonological processes. And the plural is either a nasal or an a, again, depending on the noun class system and some phonology. So the way Comfort Akan describes the nouns with plural prefixes is that these are exclusive. So here we have the negative sentence, Kofi did not buy chairs yesterday. This is true in a situation where Kofi did not buy a plurality of chairs. He could have bought a singular chair, he could have bought no chairs. As long as he didn't buy a plurality of chairs, the speakers can still say this, and it would be true. As for the plural circumfix, this is just for kinship terms in Akan, and the singulars are formed exactly the same way as common nouns. But we see for the plurals, they're formed with this a or nasal, as well as this nom suffix. Oh no, now you see it. So Akan describes these as being inclusive, which means they pattern the same way as English plurals do. So in her sentence, she gives Mary didn't see in-laws on the field, in the park. So this is true where Mary didn't see a plurality of in-laws and Mary didn't see a singular in-law. It's only possible in this case for her to have seen no in-laws. And so she gives the semantics of the plural prefix, it's a bit combined. Basically, she analyzes this plural prefix as There we go. Adding or taking away the atomic interpretation with the plural prefix and adding it back on with the plural circumfix, and that's how she gets these two different readings for the two different plural markers. So this brings us to the research question. Do Akan speakers prefer the exclusive interpretation of the prefix and circumfix? Oh, there's two of them here. Let me do this. Do Akan speakers prefer the exclusive interpretation of the prefix and circumfix plurals respectively in downward entailing contexts of negation, questions, and under the scope of universal quantifiers? So to test this, I designed 2 experiments with as close of the same design as possible to be able to compare the two. The first experiment was for the plural prefix, second experiment was for the plural circumfix. These both had a 2x4 design with the 2-level factor context fully crossed with the 4-level factor of sentence type, with all of the experimental conditions listed right here. Participants were presented with 24 test items that were interspersed with 12 filler items in a random order. And Akan does have an alphabet. In fact, it has 3 alphabets. And it's not commonly written. All of the bureaucracy in Ghana is done in English. Education is typically done in English. So to kind of avoid confusion and to avoid the pitfalls of researchers before me, all of the stimuli were presented auditorily, which were recorded by a native speaker of Akan country. During the experiment, participants were first presented with the context, then the test item, and then were asked to give a judgment on a 5-point scale, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. So all of the participants were adult Akan native speakers that were recruited mainly at the University of Ghana, as well as some other school personnel networks in Berlin. The experiment 1 had 19 participants, and experiment 2 had 12 participants. So there are 2 predictions for the research question. The first is the exclusive hypothesis, which is in line with Ahukora's analysis for the plural prefix and against her analysis for the plural circumfix. And this hypothesis predicts that the exclusive reading is the preferred interpretation of plurals in downward entailing contexts in Akan. And you can see here that the 1 and the 0 contexts always pattern together. And in the statistics, we should see a main effective sentence type, though no main effective context and no interaction. Now, you might be wondering, why does your 1 downward entailing context not pattern with the others? I've got an answer for you. It's because it's very difficult to ask for an acceptability judgment of a question, right? So because of the way that the item was constructed, and I've got the items in the appendix if you'd like to take a look, both hypotheses still predict that the downward entailing contexts pattern together, but the acceptability is reversed for questions. Just to bring that up. And the second hypothesis presented is the inclusive hypothesis, which predicts that the inclusive reading is the preferred interpretation for plurals in downward entailing contexts in Akan. So in the statistics, we should see a main effective sentence type, no main effective context, and an interaction between the 2. However, you can see in the acceptability judgments, we should see 1 and 0 pattern opposite of each other. And I've got these hash marks here because that dispreferred reading should still be available, but it's not clear to what degree. So in other previous experiments, such as on Turkish, English, and Greek, it's been as little as about 10% to, in English, I think it's about 40% of that dispreferred reading is available. So this kind of provides us a range of acceptability that can still fall within the inclusive hypothesis. So it should be between the intermediate rating of 3 and either unacceptable or acceptable. So to analyze the results of the experiment, I used a linear mixed model analysis using LNER and R. The fixed effects were context and sentence type, with the random effects being item participant and random slips by item and by participant. And I used likelihood ratio tests to obtain the p-values. So looking at the results of experiment 1, I just want to pause for a second and give all my participants and myself a round of applause. So the zero condition is exactly as predicted by both of the hypotheses. And there's been a kind of big challenge in doing experiments in Ghana. There was some colleagues in Potsdam ran an experiment and all of the items were rated the highest possible rating. So the data was absolutely useless. It's usable, so we have results. But back to what we're actually interested in, we see that the downward detailing contexts are all hovering around that intermediate mark, which means that this preferred reading was accessed, and the positive sentence is rated quite low, which is again in line with what's predicted by both hypotheses. So looking at the actual means as well as the statistics, we see those intermediate ratings pan out. We also see a main effective sentence type, no main effective context, and an interaction. And these results are exactly in line with the inclusive hypothesis. Which means I have an answer. Oh, there you can see it. And again, for the acceptability judgments are in line with the inclusive hypothesis, so we can confidently say that the plural prefix is in fact inclusive, contrary to Akan's original analysis. Moving on to experiment 2. Useful results. How nice is that? This was for the plural circumfix, and again, we see in the universal quantifier as well as the question conditions that these are around the intermediate rating. Negative and positive are both rated quite low. And so looking at the actual means and the statistics, we see a main effective sentence type, no main effective context, and an interaction between the two factors. And we see that the positive and negative sentence types were both rated quite low, with the question and universal quantifiers covering around the intermediate. In statistics, this matches up again with the inclusive hypothesis and the acceptability judgments. Though with this oddness in the negation, it still does line up with the inclusive hypothesis. I actually don't have the best explanation for this, because it should look as the, it should be the same as the other universal quantifiers, but it fits with the hypothesis, so we roll with it. So from these results, we can see that the inclusive interpretation of both the plural prefix and the plural circumfix is available and preferred in downward entailing contexts. So what does this mean for Akan's analysis? It means we have to reanalyze what the meaning contributions of the plural prefix and the plural circumfix are providing to the word. So as a reminder, she analyzed the prefix as taking away the atomic interpretation and the suffix part of the circumfix, adding it back on. So I propose that there is no plural circumfix. There's simply a plural prefix and a kinship suffix. And this plural prefix, since we know that it has an inclusive interpretation, has to come with that inclusive interpretation built in, of course, fully in the downward entailing context. And the suffix simply serves as a kinship marker and adds no plural meaning to the word whatsoever. And we have further proof from this, from the fact that you don't need the kinship marker to still get the plural interpretation. So this was actually in her paper, but it was also verified by other speaker consultants. So you can say aso, meaning a singular in-law, inso, meaning multiple in-laws, insolom, again, multiple in-laws, but it's not possible to say just solom without that plural prefix. So to conclude these two experiments, they show that Akan's plurals have an inclusive interpretation in downward entailing context, contrary to Akan's original analysis for that plural prefix. These results also show that the plural circumfix should not be analyzed as such, but instead it should be treated as a kinship suffix and a plural prefix. This also opens the doors for further experimental research on West African languages because it's possible to have results. That was the most stressful part. So, where do we go next? And here's where I'd like to present some data. I have no analysis for it, but it's really interesting, so I'd like to share. And I have some cool. So there's some nouns in Akan that seem to only have an inclusive interpretation. And these kept coming up while designing the experiments, and it was very frustrating. So let's take a look at some of them. So we call these intermediate nouns, a similar phenomenon found in Ga, another Quad language. And these nouns are most typically produce items, but can also be abstract concepts like mistakes or ideas, body parts, geographical things. But here I've taken tomatoes, stars, and oranges. And this is really interesting because they have no singular character part. They can only appear with the plural marker, the nasal or the prefix. So here in 13 and 14, you can see the contrast where I see one star still uses unswoma, the same as I see 3 stars. So despite even having that singular enumerable, there is no singular marker on the noun. And there's one data point that I regret not putting in this slide of oranges, where you can say Kofi Dianka Nomia, which means coffee ate all the oranges, and also coffee ate the whole orange. So there's a plurality, a singular, and a subatomic level to these nouns here. Interesting. So there's also the case where nouns can take both of the plural prefixes that yield different readings, one with a typical plural and one being a plurality of kinds. So here, just to keep everything straight, purple means plural, teal means types. So here we have the vocabulary item snake, which also I'd like to say, this is not IPA, it's just part of their alphabet. So if I pronounce it funny, the phonologists don't get mad at me. So obo is singular snake, awowo is multiple snakes, and umowo is multiple species of snakes. And so here are the stimuli that I showed my speaker to kind of collect this, and it's not a line. That's so frustrating. So here we see meku awowo, where it's 5 snakes of the same type. There's multiple snakes, right? And here, mehu inwowo miensa, this means I see 3 species of snakes. Even though there's 5 snakes there, the fact that there are 3 species means that he would have to use the numeral 3 with inwowo. It's not possible to say mehu awowo miensa in this case, because it means there would be only 3 snakes. And the last little piece of data I want to share with you is about jewelry. So this is where the intermediate nouns and the paradigm network of types kind of combine forces. So here we have jewelry, umbudye, and agudye, which have backwards colors for whatever reason. And the interesting thing about this, so to get the type reading for nouns that don't follow this paradigm, you would use the word aforo, which means various. And in this case, you can't use aforo with agudye, because agudye means types. So it already means there's various types of jewelry. And when it combines with numerals, ngudye, if they don't like it, because ngudye is more mass, right? And so my speaker told me she understands what I mean, but it sounds odd. A non-native speaker or a child would say this. No native speaker would say ngudye form. So you can only use numbers with the agudye, which means, to me, it seems like there's some kind of granularity to it. There's like a distributive property to these type readings to a certain extent. So this is what I'm continuing to work on when I do my fieldwork in September, and I'm excited to tease it all out. So A deeper investigation into the plural marking in Akan serves three main goals. The first is to provide a more thorough formal description of the language. I found the first intermediate noun thing that I shared with you within 2 hours of my first solicitation session, and I've read everything on this language over the past 2 years. So the fact that I can find something so quickly means more description needs to be done. The second goal is to contribute to the typology of plurals in Niger-Congo and beyond. And the third goal is to expand upon the current theory of plurality and number so that it captures the facts of a broader variety of languages, because so far I have not found the tools that I need to analyze the data that's here. So, thank you very much for listening. References and appendices.
Thank you, Madeline, presentation. We can take questions.
Just a clarification question. So, what is it the case that the is sometimes being used as just a plural morpheme or marker, and then in the other case as a species plurality marker? Or so here it looks like it's just plurality, but not the type plurality.
Right.
But in the previous examples,
It's type.
right.
So
Why is that happening? That's so cool.
the noun class. But the noun class is defunct, so it's no longer productive. If you introduce an English word like garlic, there's just no prefix, which is difficult. And there's no agreement, which is not helpful.
God, trying to compute the noun class it's a picture. But it's a nice morphology problem.
Isn't it? But this was very frustrating, and I had to check the data with like 4 different speakers because I was like, okay, n should always be types. Why is it not types here? And so there's about half of the nouns I've collected have n as types and n as just plurals, which I don't like. It would have been easier if it's consistent. But languages aren't easy. That's what they're fun.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out like what kind of thing, you know, in history or morphology perspective, or some mutual rights perspective, right? So
Yeah.
looks like on and I'm just kind of going back and forth.
Because these are the 2 plural markers, and a kind of initial idea I had is maybe in a typical sense, snake had the noun class where a was its plural marker, but people decided that they needed a way to talk about a plurality of species, and so they just picked up the other plural marker where jewelry, most mass nouns are also blood is blue, where it's the case that it was part of this noun class and they needed to pick up that meaning and just adopted the other plural marker. But there's limited historical documents, so I can't really go find it like you can in French or something, right?
Thanks.
We can take another question.
Thank you for the talk. I was just curious about the contribution of the kinship that you mentioned. Can you go back to that slide?
Ahankoras or mine?
Sorry?
Ahankoras or mine? The first one or the second one? I presume?
Well, there you said something like this. The suffix is just the kinship. Yes, maybe the next one. Yeah. Okay. Now, what would be the difference between the SC and how would you like? Is there a task that you use to define to determine the difference? Like D is already an upper neutral set in your analysis, and what norm would do is just to say that the members of the set are associated with each other somehow, or does it add new members to that set that are like that are associated with the members of the original set?
So this is another case of, of the defunct noun class system. There's also a agentive marker that has a singular counterpart where it's ni and foa. So like student is sukuni and students is sukufoa. And a lot of the cases where the agreement is lost is in the singulars. And so the hypothesis is that the singular counterpart to nom was lost with the defunctification of the noun class system, and nom is increasingly becoming optional for younger speakers. So for some vocabulary items, it was said that this nom just shouldn't be there for some speakers, and for some vocabulary items, it was necessary. So it's more or less an optional thing, like the lexical entry of in-law is still a kinship term, whether it has this nom suffix or not. But it would just be the specific dialect and speaker community as to whether it's included.
So they wouldn't have any semantic contribution.
Not necessarily. Maybe it's social meaning, telling people what kind of group you're part of. But it was even between Afro-country speakers, they disagreed on whether to include it for in-laws. Yeah.
Thank you.
Essentially, one of them here is all working.
Yeah.
Just a question about the language. Is definiteness marked in the language?
Yes. Complex. Complex.
So these cases are only definite.
Yeah.
And I had another point regarding, so you had a case in which questions were not behaving as predicted?
Or they were behaving as predicted, but the speaker would rate the acceptability opposite because of the way that the item is constructed. So, yeah. So here, the negative item, we have the context where, I'm gonna read it from here. So we have Akosua must interview 3 local people about their life. So far, she only interviewed 1. And this test sentence would be Akosua didn't interview people. And you can see the predictions of both of the hypotheses here. But in questions, this is reversed. So Mary's a nurse that helps mothers after they give birth. Usually she helps 4 mothers a day. Today I wasn't busy. So she only helped 1 mother. When Mary got home, her husband asked you, did you help mothers? Mary answered yes. So because of the way that this is constructed and the way that it's difficult to ask for an acceptability judgment of questions, that's why this is reversed from the other downward intent contexts.
Yeah, but questions are not downward entailing. They are not even entailing. Downward entailing is defined on the basis of truth.
Yes, but in this case, we use questions because of the way plurals function in questions.
So think about questions and plurals might be understood if we first have an understanding how multiplicity inferences happen with plurals. And I don't think the lexical entries before would account for that, because you really never want to say that plurals are ambiguous and they are inclusive in negative contexts and exclusive in non-negative contexts. If you go for an inclusive reading, what you want to do is that the exclusivity comes as an inference based on pragmatics, right? Now the question is, what happens to these pragmatic inferences in questions? We know what happens to implicatures in downward entailing contexts. We don't know what happens in questions with implicatures. But also there is another pragmatic view on multiplicity inferences of plurals that instead attributes them to a presupposition. Now, if you attribute it to presuppositions, it goes the other way around, because these survive both in questions and under negation. So perhaps your data might be understood within one of these views and not in the other.
Yes, and that is in the paper, but not part of the presentation.
So I was
Yeah.
thank you for the questions and thank you again for your talk. We are now inviting Baran and I for the closing remarks. Thank you.
So, hello everyone again. What a conference, huh? So this year I've been tasked with delivering the closing speech of this year's SCOL 24. And we as the SCOL organizer committee would like to thank everyone who was involved in this year's conference. First of all, I have a list. First of all, I'd like to start with the Department of Linguistics and Philology and such our dear professors. Without their support, without their guidance, this would not be possible. And of course, our speakers, Yuko Kanera and Marcus McTaggart. We are really grateful for accepting our invitations. And we would like to thank our speakers for sharing their brilliant research, and we are thankful for their contributions. And of course, we would like to thank our anonymous viewers because this year we received a record number of answer submissions, around 60. So they worked really hard for it. Thank you. And we would like to thank our chairs and moderators. They worked really hard for this event. And I personally would like to thank my dear cohort for their perseverance, for their time. We stayed calm, we stayed professional. We did it. We would like to specifically thank Dr. Demirok for his support, for his ongoing support, and I'll have to say thank you.
Thank you, Baran. So on behalf of the Faculty of the Linguistics Department, I also would like to thank all of our speakers, keynote speakers, for sharing their really exciting research with us. And more importantly, I would like to thank every single one of our graduate and undergraduate students who worked really hard to make this event possible. It was really, really excellent. Thank you.